why is it more accepted and applauded to say that you're ashamed of England than to be proud of it? In a recent interview with GMB, the political commentator Narinder Kaur has recently said that she would like a new flag because the current English flag represents the far right. An example of the far right she gave: Brexit. How ridiculous is that, Darren?
And actually, I do worry for the coronation.
In no sense is that a symbol of
See, that, you know what that is?
nationalism or racism.
That's just kind of ignorance to me, because you're waving it around, and I feel it's triggering to people.
I mean, from what I gathered, the hosts of the show, I think Susanna Reid is possibly one of the most lovely people, but the hosts of that show, Jess, did not moderate that debate very well at all. It wasn't a debate. It was a Narinder monologue, right, in which she sought to denigrate and destroy, frankly, English identity and our flag and our symbols of our nation. And that flag has been the symbol of our nation since you can go back to the 1300s, I believe. And it hasn't, since the 1300s been the symbol of the EDL or something like that, which I think is the inference that Narinder was trying to pass. But, just in textbooks in our country in the Victorian era, we actually used to teach kids of how much of a unique privilege it is to have been born British. And in Scotland, as you well know, nationalism is very much a creed adopted by almost half of the population. In Wales, they're pursuing name changes of places to bolster their perceived Welshness. And yet here in England, they would never have debates like that in Scotland or Wales. But here in England, we refuse to acknowledge how good we've got it, right? We haven't brought football home since the World Cup of 1966, but consider how good we are at a whole host of sports, for example, right? The inventors, indeed, of many of said sports. The most exciting league in the world, in my view, at least, is the Premier League. We're rich in natural resources. We're taught the world how to alleviate the very worst vestiges of poverty that you talk about through what's it called, Jess? The free economic education or something like that?
Foundation for Economic Education.
Foundation for Economic Education. You talk about this, right? And Britain is very much at the bedrock of all of that, of market competition and innovation, global poverty being reduced since the 1800s. We're the home of Shakespeare, the Magna Carta. I could go on and on. This defeatism, right? This refusal to see England or Englishness as nothing other than a malign force. It's defeatist, and it ensures that we lose as a country from the off. This is a country of William Wilberforce that led the slavery abolition movement. This is the home of the Navy that spent much of our national treasure on abolishing slavery around the world. And I just refuse to accept that England in particular itself is remotely evil. The English story is the Scottish story for the last, 300 and odd years. The English story is the Welsh story for even longer. Now, the 100 most used words in the world's language, which is English, are derived from even before the Norman invasion in 1066, right? The Anglo-Saxons, who were people that longed to be free. They're still part of us today, Jess. Rights and obligations and things like that have stemmed back for time immemorial here in Britain. Now, have we got things wrong in the past? Of course we have. Which ancient people can you name haven't got things wrong in the past? But in my view, the world is a much better place because England existed and continues to exist. We ought to be immensely proud and grateful to have been born on this blessed, damp, grey rock, as I believe it was Emma Thompson once said, the actress. Now, Narinder is herself of Indian heritage. Now, Narinder is speaking and as someone who was intensely proud, I believe, of her own Indian heritage. Now, India itself, Jess, has nationalism like you wouldn't believe. Some elements of it even controversial. I'm sure Narinder would even accept that. Would she disregard India's flag because of a concentrated form of Hindu nationalism? Of course not. Would she think it okay for me to suggest that we should abolish the Indian flag because of a concentrated form of Hindu nationalism? No. She would tell me that I'm wrong and that I'm no doubt a bigot or something like that. We in this country, Jess, we will find EU flags, Ukrainian flags, even Palestinian flags, for the love of God. But there's an aversion to our own English flag in a way in which there isn't to the Welsh, the Scottish, the Northern Irish. And I think that's wrong. We ought to reject it. Englishness and our identity ought to unite us. Our patron saint, St. George, a Christian martyr, ought to unite us because of what that man represented and refused to give up in the name of Christ and refused to repent in his Christian faith. That bravery, that fortitude represents the English people, the English tradition. Throughout our history, as I say, we have been much more of a force of good in the world than we ever have bad. And I believe that with all of my heart, Jess. I really, really do. So I'm sorry, I think Narinder and her ilk are race-baiting.